The Cost of Being Truly Human. Fyodor Dostoevsky is not just a writer. He is a philosopher, a man who spent his life grappling with the deepest questions of existence. Born in 1821 in Russia, he lived a life that mirrored the turbulence of his times. It was in this isolation, in the midst of immense suffering, that Dostoevsky found a profound understanding of what it means to be human. They are not just about events that unfold, but about the deeper questions we all must face. They dig into questions we rarely want to ask ourselves. Can we truly love when the world keeps breaking our hearts? To appear perfect, particularly in his exploration of innocence and goodness. Take Prince Mishkin from The Idiot. He is holding up a mirror and asking us to look at ourselves. He is challenging us to reconsider what it means to be strong. When we suppress our emotions and sacrifice our authenticity for the sake of fitting in, we risk losing touch with who we truly are. Dostoevsky is asking us to consider whether this external success is worth the price of our souls. In a world obsessed with status, appearances, and efficiency, he calls us to pause and reflect on what truly matters. In a world that values cold logic, status, and control, is it possible that true strength lies in being vulnerable, in staying soft, in refusing to become hardened by the harshness of life? For example, where we are constantly bombarded with messages telling us to be strong, to suppress our emotions, to hide our vulnerabilities, and to always appear confident and in control, Dostoevsky's message is more relevant than ever. We are encouraged to present a version of ourselves that is perfect, flawless, and always in control. But at what cost? Mishkin is the embodiment of innocence, kindness, and honesty. He is a man who, after years of medical treatment for his epilepsy, returns to society, only to find that the very qualities that make him human, his vulnerability, his openness, his refusal to deceive, are seen as weaknesses in a world that values status, power, and manipulation. To achieve success at all costs, Mishkin is mocked. People take advantage of him, misunderstand him, and ultimately cast him aside as a fool. In a society where strength is measured by ego, cunning, and the ability to manipulate others, Mishkin's purity is seen as a flaw. Yet Dostoevsky uses this tragedy to challenge our assumptions. What if, in a world turned upside down by greed and pride, it is the so-called fool, the one who loves without expecting anything in return, who forgives without conditions, who is actually the wisest and most courageous among us? Dostoevsky challenges us to look inward and to face the uncomfortable truth about who we are. He forces us to question, is it enough to simply conform to society's expectations? Or must we instead fight for something truer, something deeper, something that transcends the superficiality of modern life? Can we be moral in a society that rewards selfishness and pride? Can we find happiness without sacrificing our integrity? What does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to live authentically? And, perhaps most importantly, how do we survive in a world that constantly asks us to compromise our true selves for the sake of fitting in? He lost almost everything, his wealth, his status, his health, but, in return, he discovered something deeper and far more important. The core of human existence. And it was there, in the rawness of this experience, that he started writing about the human condition in a way that would change the course of literature forever. His experiences were not merely those of a writer crafting fictional worlds, but the lived reality of a man who had been imprisoned for speaking out against the state, nearly executed by firing squad, and then exiled to Siberia for years, surrounded by the brutal conditions of forced labor. These experiences would be transformative for Dostoevsky, reshaping the way he viewed humanity and, ultimately, the way he chose to write about it. During his years in Siberia, Dostoevsky was cut off from the world, surrounded by criminals and the brutal realities of life. They are mirrors held up to the soul. His most famous works, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from Underground, and The Idiot, are not just tales of moral conflict. They are profound explorations of the inner workings of the human soul, in a world that constantly pushes us to seek external validation. Dostoevsky's characters often grapple with this struggle, rather than being celebrated for his goodness. Dostoevsky is not merely telling us a story about a tragic man. In today's world, we may gain external success, recognition, and approval, but at what cost to our inner peace and happiness? In Dostoevsky's works, there is a recurring theme: the silent cost of conformity. As much as society may praise the value of fitting in, of adhering to established norms, but in many ways, impossible in a world that prioritizes ego over empathy, status over sincerity, and power over humanity. Mishkin's purity makes him an outcast. His refusal to play the games of status and manipulation, to mask his true self, in order to climb the social ladder, makes him not a hero but a fool in the eyes of others. Social media, the modern marketplaces, tells us that we must always project an image of success, happiness, and control. Instead, it is more insidious, creeping into our lives in subtle ways. Over time, we begin to doubt ourselves, to feel like imposters in our own skin. It is a call to resist the pull of conformity, to stop hiding behind false facades, and to embrace the raw, sometimes painful reality of what it means to truly live. Because in the end, the question is not whether we fit in with the world around us, but whether we are still able to be true to ourselves. That is the cost of conformity, an unspoken price that, over time, we may come to regret if we do not dare to break free. We lose touch with our emotions and, with them, the ability to truly connect with others. The very act of pretending, of conforming to what others expect of us, takes a deep psychological and emotional toll. We are encouraged to share our best selves, the polished, filtered versions that are acceptable to society. To stay true to oneself in a world that constantly tells us to be something else requires incredible courage and strength. It means resisting the temptation to play along with social expectations, to hide behind the mask of success or control. It means being willing to expose our vulnerabilities and face the possibility of being misunderstood or even ridiculed. But in this act of daring to be real, we reclaim our humanity. But behind these carefully curated facades lies a quiet desperation, a feeling of emptiness that we often refuse to acknowledge. As Dostoevsky's characters show us, when we live for appearances and social validation, we risk losing the very things that make life meaningful: truth, authenticity, and connection. And expectations. Dostoevsky warns us of the spiritual and emotional toll that this pursuit can exact. It asks us to hide our vulnerabilities, to wear masks of success and composure, and to embrace the ego-driven notion that personal worth can be measured by outward appearances. But Dostoevsky forces us to consider what we lose in the process. Mishkin, the idiot of the idiot, is a tragic yet deeply revealing figure in this context. His innocence, his purity of heart, is not simply seen as numb but as a direct challenge to the cold, calculated world around him. What Dostoevsky teaches us through Mishkin, genuine and compassionate, is not just difficult in this world. There is a hidden price that one pays for conforming, one that is often not immediately visible. Conformity demands that we suppress parts of ourselves. The truth that Mishkin's tragedy reveals is that when we hide our true selves to fit in, we are essentially choosing a life of isolation, even in the midst of a crowd. We may gain friends, social approval, and a sense of belonging, but we lose our integrity. We suppress our emotions and, in doing so, cut ourselves off from the depth of human connection that comes from being real with others and, more importantly, with ourselves. In today's world, this hidden cost is more pervasive than ever. The toll of this conformity is not always obvious. It doesn't appear as a dramatic downfall or a public tragedy. Dostoevsky suggests that the price of living authentically is steep, but it is the only price worth paying. So, Dostoevsky's challenge to us is not just to live authentically in small moments, but to question the very foundation of a world that values appearance over substance. The struggle between logic and emotion. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky introduces us to one of his most fascinating and uncomfortable characters, Underground Man. This character is a reflection of the complex interplay between rational thought and emotional chaos that exists in all of us. He is deeply aware of his intellect, which he believes gives him power over others. The underground man's life is a war between two parts of himself: the rational mind that seeks to control and the emotional heart that yearns for freedom and connection. It is this battle that makes him so relatable, because all of us have experienced moments where our intellect clashes with our emotions. The underground man's over-reliance on logic makes him a prisoner of his own mind, unable to experience the richness of life that comes from embracing our emotional depth. In modern life, we are increasingly taught to value intellect over emotion, reason over instinct. We are encouraged to prioritize efficiency, control, and productivity, often at the expense of our emotional well-being. The result is a society that is highly rational but deeply disconnected from its emotional core. People become so obsessed with making the right decisions, with calculating every possible outcome, that they lose touch with the richness of the human experience. His refusal to acknowledge the chaos and irrationality of human nature leads him to a profound sense of emptiness. He believes that by suppressing his emotions, he is gaining control, but in reality, he is losing the very essence of what it means to be human. Where we long for something more, but are unable to reconcile our desires with the logic that guides our actions. But at the same time, he is burdened by a profound sense of isolation and alienation. We live in a world where achievement is valued above all else, and emotions are often dismissed as distractions. In this context, rationality becomes a form of self-protection, a way to shield ourselves from the messiness and vulnerability of life. But in doing so, we risk losing our capacity for genuine connection with others and with ourselves. It is, in fact, something that each of us faces in our own lives. In modern society, where success is often measured by one's ability to control emotions and maintain a logical, rational approach to life, there is a deep internal conflict. We are told that emotion is something to be controlled, that being overly emotional is a weakness. In a world that prioritizes productivity, efficiency, and rationality, emotions are often dismissed as distractions, as impediments to success. But Dostoevsky shows us that this belief is not only limiting, it is destructive. His reason tells him that the world is cold and calculated, and he believes that if he can master it through logic, he can free himself from the pain of human existence. But his emotions, raw and uncontrollable, constantly undermine his intellectual superiority. He longs for connection, for love, for meaning, but he refuses to allow himself to feel these things openly, because they represent a form of weakness that contradicts his carefully constructed worldview. The underground man, trapped in his own mind, is a deeply contradictory figure. On one hand, he is brilliant, analytical, and obsessive. On the other, he is deeply emotional, impulsive, and filled with despair. His internal struggle between these two forces, reason and emotion, shapes his entire existence and reveals the painful tension at the heart of human life. The underground man's dilemma is a microcosm of the broader human condition. Dostoevsky is not just creating a character here, he is illustrating a fundamental aspect of what it means to be human. The underground man's struggle is not unique to him. Rationality, when taken to its extreme, can lead to a sterile, joyless existence. This over-intellectualization is not just a personal flaw of the underground man. It is a larger societal issue that Dostoevsky explores in his works. Dostoevsky's critique of over-rationalization is particularly relevant today, in an age where logic and intellect are often seen as the ultimate measures of success. The dangers of over-rationalizing life. While Dostoevsky presents the underground man as a representation of the painful conflict between rational thought and emotional chaos, he also offers us a profound warning about the dangers of over-rationalizing life. The underground man's excessive reliance on logic not only isolates him from the world, but also distorts his perception of reality. The underground man spends so much time pondering the meaning of his existence, analyzing his every thought and action, that he becomes incapable of living. He is trapped in a cycle of self-reflection that prevents him from acting, from engaging with the world in a meaningful way. We live in a world where achievement is valued above all else, and emotions are often dismissed as distractions. The underground man's tragic fate is a result of his refusal to accept the full complexity of his humanity. He serves as a warning to all of us that, while logic and reason are necessary for survival and success in many aspects of life, they should not be the sole guiding forces in our existence. The key to living a fulfilled life lies not in overanalyzing every situation, but in finding a balance between thought and feeling. We must acknowledge and accept our emotions, even when they seem irrational or unpredictable, for they are the very essence of our humanity. To live authentically means to embrace both the intellect and the heart, to allow them to coexist and inform each other. When we suppress our emotions and attempt to live purely by reason, we risk losing the very things that make life meaningful. He invites us to stop over-rationalizing our experiences, to stop trying to control every aspect of our lives through logic. Without emotion, without the capacity to feel deeply and authentically, we become detached from the world and from the people around us. Dostoevsky's philosophy reminds us that while reason is an important tool, it is only through embracing our emotional, irrational nature that we can truly live. We must learn to feel not just in the abstract, but in the raw, unfiltered experience of being human. By doing so, we reclaim our connection to the world and to each other, and we can begin to live a life that is not just thought out, but deeply felt. And to start living more fully, with all of our emotions in tow. It is in this acceptance of the full spectrum of human experience, reason and emotion, logic and chaos that we can find true freedom and meaning. He denies the messy, irrational side of life, choosing instead to retreat into his mind and avoid the vulnerability that comes with feeling deeply. And yet, in his most poignant moments, he reveals a longing for something more, something beyond the sterile logic he has embraced. He craves connection, but is terrified of the emotional risks involved in opening himself up to others. In this context, rationality becomes a form of self-protection, a way to shield ourselves from the messiness and vulnerability of life. But in doing so, we risk losing our capacity for genuine connection with others and with ourselves. He is paralyzed by his need to understand everything, to rationalize his every emotion. And in the process, he misses out on the spontaneity, the messiness, and the beauty of life. His intense intellectualization prevents him from seeing life in its full complexity. He believes that by analyzing every situation, by calculating every outcome, he can control his fate. But in doing so, he becomes increasingly detached from the raw, unfiltered experience of being human. Over-rationalization, as Dostoevsky shows us, can lead to paralysis. This over-intellectualization is not just a personal flaw of the underground man. It is a societal issue that Dostoevsky explores in his works. In modern life, we are increasingly taught to value intellect over emotion, reason over instinct. We are encouraged to prioritize efficiency, control, and productivity, often at the expense of our emotional well-being. The result is a society that is highly rational but deeply disconnected from its emotional core. People become so obsessed with making the right decisions, with calculating every possible outcome, that they lose touch with the richness of the human experience. Dostoevsky's critique of over-rationalization is particularly relevant today. In an age where logic and intellect are often seen as the ultimate measures of success, Dostoevsky's message is clear. The pursuit of rationality at the expense of emotion can only lead to a hollow existence. The Underground Man is a cautionary tale about the dangers of living a life that is too controlled by reason and intellect. Dostoevsky proposes not the rejection of rationality, but the integration of reason with emotion. Dostoevsky's challenge is to live not just with the mind, but with the heart as well. The Underground Man ultimately demonstrates that a life lived solely through the lens of reason is incomplete. Embracing the breakdown, finding the breakthrough, one of the most profound themes that Dostoevsky explores in his works, is the idea that real change does not come when life is going well. It often comes when everything falls apart, the moments of crisis, the breakdowns, the times when we are forced to confront the truth about ourselves and our lives. He murders an innocent woman to prove his theory that extraordinary individuals have the right to break the rules. Initially, he justifies his crime with intellectual arguments, believing that the murder is necessary for some higher purpose. But as the story unfolds, the weight of his crime bears down on him, leading to a breakdown of both his mind and his spirit. They change when their world falls apart, when a relationship ends, when they lose a job, when their long-held beliefs are challenged, or when they face some kind of personal or emotional crisis. In our culture, there is often a rush to fix things as soon as they go wrong, to restore control and stability as quickly as possible. But Dostoevsky challenges this approach. He suggests that the breakdown itself, the discomfort, the confusion, is often a necessary part of the healing process. It is in these moments of rupture that we are forced to confront the truths we have been avoiding, to confront ourselves in our most vulnerable state. In these moments of destruction, something important is revealed. Our old identities and ways of being are shattered, and we are left with the raw truth of who we are beneath all the masks and These moments, filled with pain and confusion, are not failures in Dostoevsky's eyes. Instead, they are the beginning of something deeper, a process of transformation that opens up the possibility of genuine personal growth. We are taught to avoid failure, to suppress our emotions, and to always appear composed and in control. We fear that being broken will make us weak or unworthy. But Dostoevsky presents a very different view. He argues that it is only through the breakdown, through facing the rawness of our own vulnerability, that we can begin to heal and grow. The breakdown forces us to shed the false versions of ourselves that we cling to and to emerge as something more authentic, something more real. Our egos, our pride, our carefully constructed identities, all of these things are often fragile facades that crumble under the weight of our most profound struggles. The breakdown isn't just about losing control or experiencing pain. It's about allowing the old version of ourselves to fall apart so that something new, more honest, and more real can emerge in its place. This concept is vividly illustrated in Crime and Punishment, where we follow a young man who believes that some people are above the moral law and are entitled to commit acts of evil for the greater good. Dostoevsky doesn't treat Raskolnikov's breakdown as a simple punishment for his sin. Rather, it is the start of his redemption. The guilt, the paranoia, and the disintegration of his pride are what ultimately push Raskolnikov to confront the truth of his actions, to realize that his intellectual arrogance was a mask for deeper weaknesses. His breakdown is not a final failure, but a necessary step toward becoming a more fully realized human being. In the darkest depths of his suffering, Raskolnikov begins to feel true humility, regret, and empathy, emotions that he had previously suppressed in favor of his lofty rationalizations. The key insight that Dostoevsky provides through Raskolnikov's journey is that real transformation often requires us to lose everything we thought we knew about ourselves and the world. In the real world, we see this principle unfold time and again. People rarely change when everything is going smoothly. But this breakdown doesn't just come from negative experiences. It can also result from moments of unexpected vulnerability or failure. In many ways, our society discourages this kind of breakdown. Embracing the pain, rebuilding the self, true transformation rarely happens in the comfort of stability and certainty. Many of us instinctively want to avoid the discomfort, to find a way out as quickly as possible, not just as a necessary evil but as a transformative force. Life is not just about achieving success or maintaining control. It is about navigating the highs and lows, embracing the complexities of our emotional worlds. It is the strength to face our darkest fears, to allow our old selves to fall apart, and to trust that something better will emerge from the ruins. We often try to avoid the discomfort of growth, but Dostoevsky teaches us that only by walking through the fire of pain can we emerge purified and whole. The breakdowns, the failures, and the moments of despair are part of what makes us human. Unlike his brother Ivan, who struggles with intellectual questions about the existence of God and the problem of suffering, Alyosha approaches the world with a quiet faith and compassion. We shed the layers of false pride, defensiveness, and pretense that have built up over time, and we emerge stronger and more connected to the essence of our humanity. To let it shape us, and to rise from the ashes of our former selves with greater wisdom, humility, and love. In the end, the breakdown is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of our greatest transformation, a transformation that leads us to a life that is not just lived, but truly felt. This process is not easy, but it is the only path to real, lasting change. He does not shy away from suffering, but rather accepts it as an inherent part of life. He learns to love even when it is painful, to forgive even when it seems impossible, and to maintain his faith in humanity despite its flaws. It is through these experiences that we learn to build resilience, to redefine what it means to be strong, and to reconnect with our deepest values. He does not try to intellectualize or rationalize his emotions. Instead, he chooses to feel them deeply, to allow them to shape him, and to respond with love and compassion. In this way, Alyosha embodies a profound truth. The ability to face suffering with an open heart is one of the most powerful acts of resistance in a world often tells us to suppress our emotions. In a world that constantly urges us to fix ourselves, these moments may seem like the end, but Dostoevsky teaches us that they are, in fact, the beginning of something new. They are the moments when we have the opportunity to rebuild ourselves, to re-examine who we are, and to redefine what truly matters. Instead of running from the pain, we can choose to sit with it, to learn from it, and to allow it to guide us toward a more authentic life. To hide our weaknesses, to appear flawless, we are often taught to avoid the vulnerability that comes with true growth. We are afraid that if we show too much of ourselves, we will be rejected or deemed weak. But Dostoevsky is clear. It is through this vulnerability, through allowing ourselves to fully feel and confront the pain, that we come to understand who we truly are. The desire to restore balance and order is natural, especially in a world that often equates personal worth with success and control. However, Dostoevsky challenges this impulse, urging us not to fear the breakdown or to rush through it. Instead, he encourages us to lean into the pain, to fully experience the vulnerability, and to allow the suffering to change us in ways that we cannot yet see. It is in the moments when everything seems to fall apart that we are offered the deepest opportunities for growth. This painful reality, which Dostoevsky presents through his characters' breakdowns, is not meant to be seen as a tragedy, but as a chance for renewal. In fact, The breakdown becomes the necessary process through which a more genuine version of ourselves can emerge. As Dostoevsky's works suggest, when faced with suffering or loss, for instance, Raskolnikov's journey in crime and punishment is not simply one of guilt and remorse. It is a profound reawakening. His breakdown, which begins with his crime, becomes the crucible through which he must confront the darkness within himself. The pain he feels is not just a consequence of his actions, but also the catalyst for his eventual moral and spiritual transformation. The disintegration of his false pride and intellectual arrogance allows space for his deeper humanity to emerge. Dostoevsky reveals that this kind of deep change requires us to fully embrace our pain. This is a hard truth, but one that resonates deeply with our own experiences. While it may seem counterintuitive, embracing pain and suffering is not a sign of weakness. This idea is reflected in the story of Alyosha from the brothers Karamazov. Alyosha's strength lies not in his ability to avoid pain, but in his willingness to embrace it with an open heart. In our own lives, we often encounter moments when we feel broken or lost, whether through personal failures, heartbreak, or loss. By embracing the pain of the breakdown, we become more attuned to our true selves. Dostoevsky's characters, particularly Raskolnikov and Alyosha, show us that true strength does not come from avoiding or controlling suffering. It comes from the willingness to experience it fully.